You get dickheads in any society.
I never said that I thought it would be bad.
Are you high now?
Yeah.
It's New Year's Eve at Falls Festival, and the biggest decision you have to make is whether to leave DMAs early to get a good spot for London Grammar. Suddenly, you're pushed to the ground and trampled. You can't breathe.
I just remember going, this is it. This is death. This is you dying.
Sarah McVie with you for Hack. I'll be filling in for Tom Tilley all this week. And coming up, we'll speak to a victim of the Falls Festival stampede who was hospitalised and who had to take months off work. Today, an investigation found the festival's organisers aren't to blame. We'll find out how she feels about that. First, though, reporter Ange McCormack takes you back to where it all went wrong.
I just remember going, this is it. This is when you this is death. This is you dying. And I blacked out.
19-year-old Maddie was at Falls Festival in Lorne over New Year's last year, and she was caught up in the human crush that happened after DMA's set. People rushed to get out of the tent to see London Grammar. The crowd surged, people fell and were trampled over. They were crushed and left gasping for air. This is Maddie talking to Hack just under a fortnight after it all happened. In a moment, you'll hear how she's going now, almost 11 months later.
I saw girls go down in front of me when I fell and then started getting dragged along the ground. That's when, panic started and I started going, oh shit, like help, started screaming. People just started piling on top of me. I don't know how many people were on top of me, but I was at the very, very bottom. I was like screaming until I couldn't anymore because the air was crushed out of my lungs. It wasn't painful being crushed, it was more painful not being able to breathe.
You've probably seen pictures of Maddie's face. We published a photo of her huge black and bloodshot eyes as a result of the crush. She also fractured a bone in her pelvis. Maddie was off work recovering from her injuries for 5 months. It totally changed how she lived her life.
It's just so frustrating when you have to go, hey mum, can you pay for my phone bill? Because I can't, because I've got about $25 to my name. I can't work, there's no income. That's just what happens. It just drains away over little things and then big things like counselling sessions, and then, my car battery went out.
Maddie was just one of 19 people who were hospitalised for their injuries. 76 other people received first aid treatment. But today, an independent investigation from WorkSafe Victoria has found that the organisers of Falls Festival, Ash Sounds Proprietary Limited, aren't to blame for what happened. WorkSafe Victoria says that there was insufficient evidence to prosecute the organisers of Falls Festival for any wrongdoing. Here's what part of the statement said.
WorkSafe's investigation revealed that all the conditions imposed by various bodies in relation to the event, such as crowd control, crowd size, and positioning and size of exits, had been met. As a result, WorkSafe found that there was insufficient evidence to establish any offence under the 2004 OHS Act, and no further action will be taken.
But that doesn't mean it's all over. Over 70 people have joined a class action lawsuit against the festival, which is currently underway. A trial date is set for June 2018 unless a mediation sees them settle out of court earlier. Punters have told Hack that they thought the exit was too narrow and they thought the scheduling of acts made things worse. Brendan Pendergast from Madden's Lawyers, who is leading the case, says today's findings doesn't stop the class action from going ahead.
The WorkSafe investigation is a very different thing to whether there's any civil liability for damages arising out of negligence or breach of contract or under the consumer law, which are the considerations applicable to the class action.
And then there's punters like Maddie, who are lawyering up themselves and taking their own action.
Hack. Triple J.
Ange McCormack reporting, and we did ask Falls Festival to speak to us about the crush. They declined, saying they won't be able to speak to us until the legal proceedings are finished. And if you're wondering if last year's crush will change the way Falls is run, the organisers told us the Grand Theatre stage will operate in the same place this year. They also told us that they have tried to contact everyone involved in the crush and will keep you updated as the legal challenges progress. With you is Maddie, who you just heard from in Ange's story. Maddie, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
How did you feel about the news today?
a bit distressing, to be honest. After I got the call from you guys telling me the news, I had a bit of a breakdown, and yeah, it just kind of, it feels like it's taking away from everything that happened.
It's been almost a year since it happened. What impact has the crush had on you?
I lost all of my savings because I couldn't work. And I have been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. I frequently have nightmares and just panic attacks. I've had like a few panic attacks at work. And yeah, it just, my injuries healed, but it's still problematic. I still have to continue to work on it every single day to make sure that it doesn't hurt randomly when I'm, walking around at work or, just living my life.
You're listening to Maddie. She was crushed at Falls Festival over New Year's. Maddie, you had to have 5 months off work. How serious were your injuries?
So, I was in hospital for roughly around a week. Everyone kind of saw the damage that happened to my face. That was fairly superficial, but I broke my sacral ulnar, which is the joint in your pelvis, and so I couldn't use my left leg for quite a long time. I was on crutches for roughly about a month and a half, and then I had to learn how to walk again and just function normally.
It's so awful. On the text line, someone says, I remember seeing Maddie's photo and it continues to haunt me. Anna in Bayswater, you were at Falls and you feel really affected by the crush.
Yeah. So it sort of happened in front of me and it was pretty traumatising. But yeah, I definitely feel so bad for everyone who was involved because it was really awful.
Yeah, it's not what you're expecting when you're trying to celebrate New Year's. Hey, thanks for the call, Anna. Maddie, you decided not to get involved with the class action, but you are pursuing your own legal action. What do you hope to get out of that?
I don't have my hopes up for anything. I'm not doing this for greed or anything like that. If I could be compensated for the money that I lost not being able to work, that would be good. But other than that, I want everyone to be safe. I want, them to move the Grand Theatre, the tent, just because, it's dangerous and I know how dangerous it is. And yeah, I want everyone to be okay when they want, you go to Falls Festival to have a good time.
Yeah, and I'm wondering,
forget everything.
I'm wondering if what you've been through has affected whether you can go to festivals in the future. Are you at least moving towards being able to enjoy live music again?
Yeah, I've been to a couple of gigs, but each time I have panic attacks, and I kind of like have a hand signal almost to my friends, like, get me out, like, because I can't handle it. I can't, mosh. I can't do anything like that. I want to, it really sucks because I love my live music, and I'm working towards it for sure, but it's not something that's going to come very easily.
No, and I mean, it probably feels like a super long time because it's been almost a year now, but, life is long and I'm sure that there's a lot of live music ahead of you, and we really hope that your recovery is good. Thank you so much for coming in and speaking to us, Maddie.
Thank you so much for having me.
On the text line, someone says, I'm so sorry for what's happened to Maddie, but isn't it just a freak accident? Crowds of people are dangerous. And Maddie, you say, I was in the crush but escaped injury as I'm a 6'3" guy. It was the scariest experience of my life.
Hack. Triple J.
You are listening to Hack. I'm Sarah McVie, and in a moment, we're going to find out why rates of gonorrhea have skyrocketed among young people. And if you've had gonorrhea, I'd love to hear from you. You can be anonymous, 1300 055536, or you can text me 0439 75 7555. Did you have symptoms?
As a state, we are dealing with the largest mass shooting in our state's history.
As he exited the church, a local resident grabbed his rifle and engaged that suspect. The suspect dropped his rifle and fled from the church.
Triple J.
At least 26 people are dead, including the gunman, after he opened fire in a small community church in Texas. It's a terrible tragedy and part of a much bigger problem. Every year, more than 3,000 Texans are shot and killed. Just recently, the state loosened its gun laws. It now costs just $40 to get a licence. And if you buy a gun at a gun show, you don't even have to have a background check. Ed Scruggs is the vice chair of Texas Gun Sense. They push for tighter gun control, and he says it's especially tough in Texas, where carrying a gun is part of their identity.
There is a strong connection to firearms and the social community in rural Texas. It's very strong. It makes up a big part of the identity for some folks.
How easy is it for someone in Texas to get a gun?
Pretty easy. I think, we do have a background check law, but there are many, many ways to get around that. In recent years, Texas has taken to loosening restrictions on obtaining weapons. A few years ago, we legalized the open carry of firearms. That's wearing a handgun on your hip or in a holster openly in most locations. We also legalized the right to carry firearms inside college campus buildings, and there was opposition to that. In many of these legislative districts in rural Texas, you have to be seen as being pro-gun in order to be elected.
Hack on Triple J.
That was Ed Scruggs from Texas Gun Sense after at least 26 people were shot dead at a church in Texas. The victims were aged between 5 and 72 years old. And as you just heard, Texas has been loosening its gun laws.
Hack.
What we're looking at here is the biggest leak in history. We are seeing things that people need to know about. We're seeing the lengths that companies do go to avoid taxes. We're seeing secrets.
On Triple J.
Have you ever tried to claim a little extra on your tax return? Maybe a pair of black jeans you have no intention of actually wearing as your work uniform? While the tax office goes after you for that, some of the richest people in the world are avoiding paying almost anything at all. Four Corners reporter Marion Wilkinson is with you. She's had access to a huge leak of top secret documents. Thanks for your time, Marion.
Well, you're welcome.
Who's been avoiding paying their tax?
Well, mainly a lot of multinational corporations and some very high wealth individuals. So I think what we're trying to pick apart in this program tonight is a lot of what we're seeing in these tax havens, is quite legal. There's very high-priced lawyers and accountants putting all this stuff together saying, yep, you can do this, you can do that. And I think what we're saying is, okay, if this is legal, then maybe the laws need to change. But the other side of it is there's an interesting interview with the Deputy Tax Commissioner in the program tonight where they're saying, look, we really want access to these documents, these secret documents, because we have trouble tracking down people in tax havens. And we've got a whole lot of investigations on the boil at the moment, especially into multinational corporations operating here. And we think we can use these as part of our investigations.
So who are some of the famous people that people would know of that have been evading tax?
Well, I think that probably there's a number of high-profile hedge fund operators, political party operatives. There's going to be a the Queen is an interesting one. The Queen actually only has to voluntarily pay tax. So what this shows is that these financial dealings can also rebound on you, even if they're not necessarily tax-related. If you want to have your secrecy jurisdiction investment, we found this situation where the Queen was tipped into an investment fund in the Cayman Islands tax haven. Turns out was investing in a predatory loan company, charging high-interest loans to very modest Brit citizens. And ripping them off. So this is going to be highly embarrassing for her. And I think that there's a number of the disclosures in here, including like with Donald Trump's Commerce Secretary, where they've been hanging on to financial investments that are quite controversial.
So just to explain, this is one of Trump's top colleagues, US Secretary of Commerce Wilbur Ross, and you've revealed that he has connections to people who are associates of the Russian president.
That's right. It's a very bizarre situation where Wilbur Ross, who was a billionaire Wall Street guy, joins the Trump administration. He's a great mate of Donald Trump's. He's supposed to divest all his business interests because he's supposed to be serving the public. He says, I'm going to keep a few. It turns out those few are invested in a big shipping company having contracts with a Russian company essentially controlled by Vladimir Putin's inner circle. Not a good look.
So we've heard these sorts of stories before. We had the Panama Papers last year, which I know you're involved in reporting. And we hear that politicians and all these rich and powerful people are either not paying any tax or paying bugger all tax, and then it feels like nothing happens. I mean, what's the point of learning what we all already suspect?
Well, it is a bit like that. But there are efforts that are being made to tighten up the laws, and I think they're absolutely crucial. In the Panama Papers last year, it did push the government to actually fund a lot more of the tax investigations that are going on. So far, just from the Panama Papers, the tax officers clawed back about $50 million, and this is just from the people who voluntarily came forward because they were freaked out by the report. So I think it does change things, but it really needs that public pressure to say to the politicians, we need tighter laws.
Yeah, and it's a very popular one for sure, going after the rich and famous. Marion, thanks for your time. You can catch more on that story on Four Corners at 8:30 tonight on ABC One. On the text line, someone says, what? I was audited for a tiny $300.
I was really, really angry that it hadn't already been suggested the first time I went to the doctor.
Hack. Triple J.
Have you started seeing someone new and thought, we'll risk it just this once without a condom? The chances of you ending up with gonorrhea are higher now than they've been in a long time. In a moment, you'll find out how to know if you've got it and what to do about it. First, Shalila Medora finds out why gonorrhea's made a comeback.
Kate was 24 when she and her long-term boyfriend split up. He was the first guy she'd ever had sex with. After a few months, she decided to get back out there on the dating scene.
I met somebody at a party in September who was a friend of a close friend of mine. Once I'd known him for a little while, I had a one-night stand with him with a condom.
Everything seemed fine until December, when she developed painful cysts.
A Bartholin's cyst is like a boil on the surface of the vulva. It was really enormous, and I actually had two, so they were rubbing against each other. Excruciating.
A gynaecologist recommended Kate book in for surgery straight away.
And the procedure is called a marsupialisation. So what they do is they actually cut open the cyst so that they so all the fluid drains out. So it's like having lots of showers constantly all the time to try to like clean it out and keep it clean. And then I also was carrying around like ice packs in my underwear because the pain was really bad. And then I had to wear like really heavy duty pads to absorb all of the excretions.
The cysts were a symptom of a sexually transmitted infection, gonorrhea. Kate's asked us not to use her real name because there's still a whole lot of stress and stigma associated with STIs. It took Kate months and 4 separate doctors before she was even asked to do an STI test. By then, she'd developed pelvic inflammatory disease, a serious condition that can lead to infertility.
I was really angry because it was only the second person I'd ever had sex with. I was angry that it had happened even though I thought I'd taken enough precautions. And I was really, really angry that it hadn't already been suggested the first time I went to the doctor.
Gonorrhea is a bacterial infection that's super contagious and pretty damn common.
If I could say roughly it's probably about 1 in 100. So it can be through vaginal sex or anal sex or oral sex.
That's Associate Professor Rebecca Guy from the Kirby Institute at the Uni of New South Wales. Research by the institute that's out today found diagnosed cases of gonorrhea have gone through the roof.
The report shows that in the last 5 years, there's been a 63% increase in gonorrhea rates in Australia.
Young women living in the city have seen the largest jump in infections.
For women, there's been a 126% increase.
While the research can't point to why it's increasing, Rebecca reckons part of it has to do with sexual norms changing.
People are having more partners in their life. They're also delaying marriage, and people are having more oral sex as well.
You can have it and not realise.
About 80% of women who've got gonorrhea don't know. They don't have symptoms unless they have a test.
The proportion of testing for STIs for young people from GPs is really low.
Only about 20% have a chlamydia or gonorrhea test, and only about 10% of young men.
If it's caught early on, it can be cleared up with drugs.
The levels of resistance are creeping up a bit, but still the gonorrhea at the moment still can be treated with the antibiotics that are recommended in the guidelines.
And we could soon see a vaccine for the STI.
We want to find out where the magic is.
That's Helen Patousis-Harris from the University of Auckland. The Kiwi team undertook a trial to see if the meningococcal vaccine affected rates of gonorrhea infection. It did.
People who received the meningococcal B vaccine were about a third less likely to get gonorrhea compared to those that did not.
Her team is now working on fine-tuning the vaccine so it can be used in the fight against gonorrhea.
It gives us a place to start looking because we really don't know what protects against gonorrhea.
Hack. Triple J.
That was Helen Patousis-Harris from the University of Auckland, ending that report by Shalala Medora. On the text line, someone says, I've had gono twice in the last year, once in the throat with no symptoms and once with very painful burning. And someone else says increases in gonorrhea are probably due to apps like Tinder and people looking for hookups. With you is Dr. Chris Bourne. He's a senior staff specialist at Sydney Sexual Health Centre. Thanks for being here, Dr. Bourne.
Thanks for having me, Sarah.
Kate had no idea she had gonorrhea. How can you tell?
Well, testing's the best way to find out, and this is something we encourage for all STIs. And one of the recommendations are to get a test at least once a year, or if you're changing partners, one or more partners, or a change of partners, a new relationship, for example. I sort of call it like drawing the line in the sand. So know where you're up to at that point in time, putting your past behind you, so to speak, and then you can move forward.
So every time you sleep with someone new, you have an STI check?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably a little over the top because you'd spend a lot of time going to the clinic, and but like
depending
an annual check, how busy you are, yes.
Sarah, in Sydney, you were diagnosed with gono over Easter.
Yeah, I was.
And how did you figure out that you had it?
Well, I didn't know. I thought it was just a UTI at the start because, it was super painful and it just transitioned into not being able to walk, and I was crying from pain and couldn't move, and I had my best friend there that was there sleeping with me. She was unreal and knew what I was going through, and she just ended up taking me to the hospital, and then they just said I had gonorrhea and gave me the injection and said I'll be all fine, but I didn't get the internal examination and it actually transitioned into something a bit worse.
Oh my goodness, that's awful. Someone on the text line says there's far too much stigma of getting an STI check. Were you getting tested regularly?
Yeah. So before that, I was diagnosed with chlamydia before, and it's super easy to go in there, and the clinics they were so helpful. You can even get condom credit cards. So if you can't afford condoms, I've actually got one of those now, and I just go in there and they stamp my card and they give me a free box of condoms.
That's a really good tip. Sarah, thank you so much for the call.
No worries.
With you is Dr. Chris Bourne. He's a senior staff specialist at Sydney Sexual Health Centre. Dr. Bourne, we just heard that it got so bad that Sarah couldn't actually walk before she realised what was happening. I mean, are there early signs that we could be looking for?
Yeah, look, as you heard before from Professor Guy, is that, many infections don't have symptoms, so having the test is the way to go for those. Some can be more subtle and they can be confused with other infections. So when you have a genital symptom of any sort, it's best to get it, investigated for multiple infections because, for example, what the caller was describing could have been sort of quite a severe case of herpes or skin irritation, infection on the outside. But pelvic pain is what can happen with gonorrhea, so the pain can be internal, and that can cause cramping, bloody, smelly, yellow discharge from the vagina, and that's what PID could be in an extreme form, and people are usually admitted to hospital to treat that. So we don't want it to get to that point for most people. We want them going to the doctor if you've got minor symptoms, even if it's a change in discharge, a change in odour, and pain, urinating, as the caller described. These could be signs of gonorrhea.
Absolutely good to go early, but what about if you don't have any symptoms at all? That can happen, can't it?
It can, yes, and it's no different if you've got symptoms that are minor. You're going to be treated in the same way. It's only if it's very complicated with the severe pain that was described that you would need to be admitted to hospital. The treatment is, as Professor Guy said, that the standard treatment is still working now. There's the odd case of resistance, but that's why it's important when you do get a test to make sure you get the right test done so you can investigate that as well at the same time.
And if you don't have symptoms and you let it go because you don't know that you've got it, what are some of the long-term implications for untreated gonorrhea?
Yeah, well, you can get complications in genital tract, which includes, in an extreme sense, the PID that's the caller described, that might mean you need to be admitted to hospital. But even the subtle low-grade signs, if they aren't treated early, can cause scarring and potentially changes to the fertility.
On the text line, someone says, I've had gonorrhea 3 times and chlamydia twice. It's never something to be angry about. Just be kind and contact all partners without having a panic. Dr. Bourne, do you have any suggestions about maybe how to have that conversation if you do get a positive diagnosis for gonorrhea or any other STI and you do need to ring people that, maybe you don't know that well?
Yeah, no, that's a great suggestion. And in fact, it's good to hear that the message coming through like that and not being ashamed of informing partners. And we find more and more now that when we call people up with positive results, for example, and tell them that, we need to talk about telling your partners, often they've called them or messaged them before they've even come in for their own treatment. So that's really good. And there are ways to do that either online or you can message your friends and ensure that you use the word gonorrhea and what specific treatment they should have. But also the doctor or health workers or counsellors at sexual health services across Australia can help you with that if you feel like you can't do that yourself. But most people...
they'll get in touch on your behalf?
Yeah, so you need to give them obviously the information, but they won't disclose who's got the infection. They'll make a call to them and saying your name's been given to us as someone who is at risk of gonorrhea and you want to consider having a test and some treatment. Yeah. So, there are all these different options now on their websites you can go to send messages, so the message comes from the website so it doesn't identify you. This has all been put up to help people with that, approach. And luckily, people respond very well to it. And the studies that we've looked at actually show that most people tell people face-to-face or call them on the phone and tell them. There's really way less shame and stigma around that than when I started in this field, and that's very encouraging.
Absolutely, it is.
Yeah,
Someone on the text line says, last time I went to the doctor for a regular screening, she asked me, why would you want to test for that? Do doctors have a bit of a way to come when it comes to speaking to people honestly and, without judging them about their sexual health?
Yeah. Look, I mean, thankfully those stories are odd, or unusual now, and I'd recommend you pursue it because the way we teach doctors now is that if someone asks for a test, don't deny them that test because often there are things that person may not want to tell you and that there might be a risk that you need to cover off for that person and to satisfy, your duty of care to that person to do a battery of tests that will help them test for sexually transmitted infections, particularly as we know many of them are without symptoms.
And if you get the antibiotics to treat the gonorrhea, how long before you can have sex again?
Well, usually the symptoms, or if you've got symptoms, will resolve in a couple of days. We recommend about a week without sex, just to make sure you're healed up, you're ready and comfortable again. Also gives you a chance to inform partners. For example, if you're in a relationship, it's important not to have sex again until your partner's been tested or treated as well. Otherwise, it gets very complicated. You can go around in circles and having to be retreated because you might have got the infection back from your partner who hasn't been treated.
Thank you so much for your time on the show today. Hey, that's all we've got time for. Linda's up next with Good Nights. I'll catch you tomorrow.
On Triple J.